welcome to day 2 of the Spawn on Me Wardcast Collab Couch. I'm Dylan Alvento.
I am Kahlief Adams. Hello.
And we're joined by our first group of guests. On the far left, we have Victoria Tran from Kitfox. How you doing?
Hi, I'm good.
That's good. Also, Robin Hunicke.
That's right.
From Funomena.
That's right.
That's right.
Recently rebranded from Funomena.
Okay. Trying to decide, but yeah. And then Kelly Wallick from Indie Mega Booth.
Hello.
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
How's everyone's E3?
Great. Hot.
Sweaty.
Yes. I hear LA is. This is my first time in LA and
Really?
E3. Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay, yeah.
I hear this isn't usual for LA
Literally
weather.
every day, all the time. This is LA.
Really? All the time.
Every time
Only
I'm here,
usually
it's
with
kind of like
lasers.
this, actually.
Actually, there's more lasers usually.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, we're doing pretty good with
Yeah.
less lasers.
I also hear that San Francisco is on fire currently.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Is
like
it really?
Heat
just
wave.
really hot.
Oh, okay. Not actually
yeah.
on fire.
Yeah,
Jesus,
it's a
man.
worry in California.
I was
Sorry.
sadly going to
Oh,
just
no.
make a
Yeah.
hot wildfire reference because of how hot my body is right
Yeah,
now.
you're like,
And then
no.
when he said that, I was like, that's like totally not
Yeah.
okay now.
Yeah.
Kelly, I'm curious. What's going on with Indie Mega Booth here? What are you up to?
Oh my gosh. Well, I thought it was going to be a kind of chill E3 for me, and I was like, oh, I'm going to drive down. It's going to be fun. I'm going to have a couple meetings, and it's like been back to back to back to back to back
really?
stuff. Yeah. So I actually had 2 lunches today, accidentally.
Hope you're hungry.
Yeah, it was great. I'm starving. So, yeah, but it's been really great. And like one of the things I was realizing is a lot of the meetings that I have now are just people that I enjoy having conversations with.
That's
So
good, yeah.
even though it's hard to kind of be like, I was joking, to be like smart and witty and funny and interesting and high level like business conversations for like this long in a row, like that's a cool problem to have.
Right.
So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's been pretty great. Yeah.
That's
So
good.
yeah, so I'm only like kind of day 1 into it, but still feeling energized, getting a lot of sleep, drinking a lot of water.
That's good.
Staying
That's always
cool.
good.
Yeah.
That's always
You
good.
already beat E3 then.
I know,
That's
I know.
because you were like
Everyone.
hydrated and
Yeah.
you had sleep.
I just
E3
zoom out.
defeated.
Yeah, so you're good. You're good.
Robin,
Yeah.
what about you? Are you showing anything here? Is
I'm
this-
not showing anything here, but Luna is going to ship on the PlayStation and PSVR
Yay.
on
Awesome.
the 18th.
Oh,
so
wow.
really soon.
That's close.
Yeah, so very, very excited. And I was going to have a bunch of demos and meetings around the launch. And I decided instead to do my press in New York City next week.
Okay.
Oh.
And this is a story. So I normally rent an Airbnb across from the convention center so that I can have my meetings in air conditioning and
Yeah.
peace and quiet.
Yes.
And I didn't need it this year, so I almost canceled it, but I waited too long. So it was going to be like, you get no money back. And then the day before the show, I got an emergency email saying that the people that were renting me the space couldn't vacate it, and they had to refund me and give me $191 for my inconvenience.
Nice.
So it's the best E3 of my life because
No,
I
it's the
paid
worst E3. You can't find a
$3,500.
space. You have nowhere to stay.
So yeah, now
You're
I'm going to
upset.
buy a really expensive purse.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Yes.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Actually, I'm kind of not, but anyway.
And I mean, that's a real worry because I know like people at GDC that like fly in and it's like,
Can
I have an
you
Airbnb.
imagine?
Oh, no, I
Yeah.
don't.
Can
yeah,
you
I had that happen
imagine?
in GDC once, and we stayed in the world's
Can you
scariest
imagine?
hotel.
I would
Yeah.
be like tearing my hair out right
Oh,
now.
I would have freaked
So,
out. I would have freaked out.
Laziness pays
Yeah.
off. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, don't
Okay.
stress. Don't book
I'll
those
believe it.
meetings. Like,
I'll
just
believe
hang out, have like extra
Yeah.
lunches.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm doing great.
Have 5 lunches.
Yeah.
Just lunch all day, every day for 3 days straight.
How was your E3? I'm a little bloated.
Yeah.
Victoria, what's going on? I'm staring at the boyfriend dungeon
Yeah, it's so great.
banner over there.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's good. It's my first E3.
Oh,
So
yes.
it's,
Wow.
Wow.
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I'm already exhausted. So I think that means it's good, maybe?
Yeah.
It feels like the apocalypse.
Yeah.
So,
You know what that
You're
reminds
wearing
me of?
sensible shoes, which is important. You
Yeah,
have to
that's
wear
what
flat
I'm wearing.
shoes. Yes.
I've done a lot of boothing, some with Indie Mega Booth, which is great.
Right.
Roots.
But yeah, it's good. A lot of people are thirsty for weapons and dating their swords, so it's all good here.
Yeah,
That's great.
Yeah. Everyone here has been in Indie Mega Booth, right? Like Robin, have
yes,
you shown for
yeah.
Funomena?
Multiple times.
Hey.
Yeah.
We showed Tom the very first time ever,
Oh,
like
yeah.
5 years
Yeah.
ago.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
At the Mega Booth. Yeah.
Hey, we're still around.
yeah, I know.
We're here for you
Exactly.
whenever it
Exactly.
Waving
And that's
to
coming
the
out in
Annapurna
like the
booth.
fall, so
Yeah.
that's like crazy.
It's like,
you know,
hello.
like, it takes a long time to make games.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to focus on that because like I like talking about indie stuff and like Indie Mega Booth is like such a staple of the PAXs now, and
Yeah.
then also GDC, and it's interesting like seeing people that the really like out there kind of stuff, like, oh, I've never heard of this game, never heard of this
Yeah,
project and stuff, and then more well known stuff,
Yeah.
and like I don't know, how do you balance that? How do you balance finding all those projects, all those people?
Yeah, I mean, our curation process is pretty intense. Like, I wrote something about it a few years ago where it was like, hey, here's the secret. Here's like a 4 series blog post that goes super in depth. That's like 1 million words explaining how we do it. But we're actually really conscious of the types of games that we pick and the teams that we want to work with. So we actually do really want a good mix of like who are teams that have been in the industry for a while that can act as mentors to younger developers, who are younger developers that we think are up and coming that have a lot of potential.
Right.
What's a mix of things that people are going to be really excited about and be like, oh my God, I really have to go into the space and find that game. And then what is the stuff that they're going to like accidentally discover while they're there as well too. So we're very aware of that while we're doing the curation. But like the kind of like long and short answer of it is like it takes a lot of work and a lot of people. And we open up submissions twice a year, and we're probably doing curation work for like 3 months, in the lead up to like a show, from start to finish of everything. So it's like there are a lot of people that spend a lot of time and a lot of dedication to like having these discussions and making those decisions.
We have this conversation all the time.
Yeah.
We did a whole AIS podcast on this particular topic of curation, and Kelly and I just basically talked about like you can't just sort of cede this territory to robots. Like it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right.
And especially if you want to see difference and inclusion, if you want to be radically inclusive and radically innovative in any genre, but especially in games, you have to broaden the kinds of people that participate in the system. And so like when I founded Funomena, it's the same thing. I just do that same curation process, but with hiring and, spend a lot more time trying to find the right people, bring people into the boat because the rising tide floats all boats, and then also sponsor and mentor people as they leave Funomena to start their own projects. One of the people that we were just collaborating with just announced that she's going to go and take over a studio and start running it, and it's like, I'm already on her advising, committee, like sending her documents and helping her. Like, this is the kind of thing that you can do is like, if you take the time to curate, if you take the time to mentor, if you take the time to make games that are different, then you see that change in the community. And it's an active process. It's not something that just happens by accident.
And there's another part of the IMB submission project or process, that I think you have like a question in there, like what are your or you say in the FAQ that like you look for people that like contribute to games like outside of like a good game.
Yeah, contribute positively to the gaming community. Yeah, and we've definitely had games come through where it's like, oh, this game looks great, but like, do they really represent like what we want to see in the industry moving forward? And like, thankfully there's not as many of those as there are the kind of opposite is like, hey, if this game just had like a little bit more, if they had a little more networking or a little more like kind of mentorship, like they could really kind of like move the needle. And so like sometimes too, we'll get people that are like, hey, I make games in like the middle of Louisiana and I know nobody else who makes video games. And I'm like, please come and like meet other people because you're going to go crazy, if you're just in the middle of nowhere by yourself. Because then they can learn from the community and then go back to their local community and really start to facilitate stuff there. And outside of the shows, we also do a lot of ways for the community to talk to each other and communicate outside of that as well too. So it's like it's grown into this kind of like really large support network for the professional development, personal development, and like to kind of make the gaming community better overall. And that's been a very long, steady, deliberate process. It's going on like 8 years now. And like at the beginning, that's not very exciting. And like, not a lot of people know about it, and it's slow and it's not really cool, because it's like, we're not always doing the coolest things. But, now it's like, I can look back at it and feel really proud of like what we've built and the work that we've done and like have this community that's super supportive, very positive, and like doing, I think, really big things in the industry that like, might not have been possible if I was like, oh yeah, we just want to like get, this, and this in here, and we don't give a shit about, can I curse on this?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we don't give a shit about anything else, we just want to like, fuck that.
Yeah, right?
And that's that, fuck that.
I mean, it feels like the indie space is stronger than it's ever been. It's kind of grown in better ways, and everyone is kind of doing each one, teach one version of it now, and kind of giving back to those spaces. Do you feel like a show like this is doing better in kind of fostering and giving those folks better spaces? Of course, we see Indicate here, and we see other folks in kind of smaller booths and stuff doing that work. But do you feel like the industry, as far as the ESA and E3, that they're kind of helping to foster those things as well?
We've had a really direct conversation with Dan at the ESA about this. I really love Dan and Stan. I'm a Stan. The new head of ESA is super amazing. And we've talked a lot with them, even over the last year, about how to expand the indie presence here. I really think that there is a lot of potential. I run an undergraduate program at UC Santa Cruz, and one of my teams has a game here at Indicate.
Do they really?
They do. They just came over and said hi before we started the podcast.
I was wondering who that was.
It's like four of my students. And
I love that.
It's a very similar thing as with what Kelly was saying with the Mega Booth. When I started the program 5 years ago, it was like me teaching 2 classes and then teaching 2 more classes, and then suddenly I needed to hire someone, then teach a few more classes. And when we started out, nobody was going to put our games in the, in a booth at E3. That wasn't going to happen. But 4 years in, we started having games showing up here and also in other showcases like PAX. And now it breeds dividends, right? Like you get those dividends. And so the sort of the question that we've been putting forward to the ESA is, what is the way that we expand and multiply this space now? How do we go from being one tiny little indie space at E3 to a community of people, much like the Mega Booth, that has this ability to sort of reflect and support one another through the process? Because once you have a game on a show floor, then what do you do, right? This is the question, like, where do you go? And what's so great with what Kelly has built is that there's a community behind it. Just like with my program, there's a community of students, and as they graduate, they support each other moving forward. And like, we want to be able to give those experiences to the developers,
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that as well. It's like, you have a game on the floor. Yeah. What's it been like as a person kind of debuting, or not debuting, but showing your game on the floor? What are folks kind of coming to you with in terms of like, hey, I'm like foot traffic just coming past the booth. Like, what is the conversation happening around your game and around the stuff you're already doing?
Yeah, it's been really good. I think the thing with indie games is that they usually have the most, kind of silly, sometimes premises to them. And that's kind of what indie games bring to the table, I guess, because we are independent and we kind of do whatever we want sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the thing about like indie games and like these kinds of spaces is usually like, for Kitfox, we're quite privileged in that we could afford to come here.
Sure.
But there's a lot of places that either they can't get visas to come to the States to show in places like this, or they don't have the means to do so. Yeah. So I think like supporting those kinds of things are really interesting. But so far the foot traffic has been awesome. They've been really receptive. I haven't been to previous E3s, so maybe it's different, but we'll see. So far, I think it's really
smells like E3 to me.
I mean, you could have told me. You could have told me.
Just for the audience, the smells of E3 are wafting through the door. So
yeah.
I mean, it's pretty. I think it's pretty standard for the industry day. Tomorrow will be.
Oh yeah,
totally bonkers.
Yeah, because it's today's industry, and then what tomorrow?
Tomorrow will be public.
I think it's like the DEF CON scale.
Yeah, it's gonna get a lot sweatier.
It's like E3 smell, and then it's like PAX smell, and then it's like Gamescom smell.
I was gonna say nothing will be Gamescom. So
I've never been. I've never been, but that's the weird thing that like I hear about Gamescom. It's not about the games. Not about any of this stuff. It's like that bad boy smell.
It's just a lot of backpacks.
Yeah. Backpacks is smushed.
It is.
Yeah.
Very
I have been and have not been back, so that's
dang.
Kelly, I'm not Kelly. I'm sorry. Robin, I wanted to ask you a question because you have been jumping into some of the fields that we have been treading in for a while in the podcasting space.
Yeah.
That has been super dope to see you kind of jump in to do some of that stuff as well.
This week I'm going to be doing an interview with Austin Wintry from Journey to talk about the release of Journey on the PC, which just happened this week. So it just came out on the Epic Store. Very, very excited. Go buy it. Very hard on it. But it was a really long journey to get Journey out of the PlayStation universe, and to be able to put it out on the PC has been super exciting. Yeah. And to be able to go back and talk to Austin about what was effectively almost 10 years ago now, working together on this score. We worked really closely together. It's just nice. I mean, like, they give me the opportunity to interview people that I love and like talk to them about things I care about. Yeah. So, I think the secret to doing it is to do it with people that you care about, and to do the things that you really want to see in the space. And I want to see more sound designers and musicians getting recognition for the amazing amount of work they do to make games awesome. We often hear from the game designer, but we don't hear from the curator. Yeah. We don't hear from the sound designer. We don't necessarily hear from the person that's doing all the work on the back end to make sure that a game gets financed. And those jobs are really important and sometimes very undersung. So I've really enjoyed being able to do those interviews. And then sometimes I just get to interview people that are really, really amazing designers, like Lucas Pope. I did an interview with him recently. And Justin from, I'm going to forget the name of the game now. FTL, and Into the Breach. And so Subset Games. Yep. And so that, those kinds of interviews give me the opportunity not just to sort of hear about the unsung heroes, but also kind of dig in behind what it means to do game design. Yeah. And Justin in particular gave a really good interview on the topic of staying zen in the face of uncertainty. So learning how to face the fact that you don't really know what your game's going to look like or play like for a super long time. I mean, did you guys know that Boyfriend Dungeon was going to be so fabulous from the very beginning?
No.
I see this today, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I totally knew that.
Yeah.
I believe in our
I wanted you
team.
to stand so hard for that. I was like, I knew from day one.
We announced it like early because we were so nervous no one would like it that we were just like, you know what, just put it out there, and if people like it, we'll keep making it. Cool. Okay, great.
You need a little confidence boost.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, this is part of the fun thing, like with doing the curation. I'm really thankful that I got an opportunity to like learn some project management and how like games are made and designed and stuff before I started doing the mega booth, because like we see stuff in progress all the time, and like it is really, really hard to look at something and be like, this is going to be great, or this is going to be this, and like I've talked about this a little bit before, but it's like it's really easy to tell when a game is really bad or when a game is really good. You know, like you look at a really bad game, you're like, that's super bad, like that is not going anywhere. And then you look at a really amazing game, you're like, holy shit, that's blowing my mind. But there's like, you know, 95% of stuff is in the middle somewhere, and like, you know, is that on the cusp of being great? Is that on the cusp of not being great? Does it just need this? Do people need to look at it? Is the idea fundamentally, you know, maybe potentially impossible? And so there's a lot of the kind of game space that is in that. And somebody had said to me once, which I thought was fascinating, is there's not a lot of entertainment industries where fans and a lot of other people see it while it's in progress. Like nobody's like showing half of their movie for like a couple of years.
Show me the green screens. I want to see those.
Yeah, where it's just like a guy in balls and like, you know, like glued onto him, just hopping around in front of a green screen. And so like it's kind of like this weirdly collaborative process, like the way the games are made. And so people are seeing things that are in progress, and that's not something that you see in any other kind of industry. And like, and it can be shaped by feedback that you're getting, you know, by players or by people as you're seeing it. And so it's like a really fascinating space to like look at things and be like, wow, where is this going to go? You know, and like, and for you guys, you know, something that you're like, I don't have no idea if anybody likes this. I look at it and I'm like, oh my God, yes. You know, like, but that's my job, right? Is to like be able to look at something and be like, yeah, I think this is really going to resonate with people because I'm seeing this kind of like, what are fans looking at? You know, what are other game designers working on? What's the shift in the industry? And that's like a really kind of hard, like / unique perspective to be able to have when you look at something.
But I think that's like really important because it's like in those kind of decision-making like places, like a lot of people had looked at Boyfriend Dungeon and were like, you should change the name. It's not a good game. Like you shouldn't do it.
Because, they're dead now, right?
Yes, they're all dead.
Yes, it's unfortunate we lost them in the apocalypse.
Yeah, bummer, total bummer.
So we did get the answer to who
all
would
those
get
people
raptured.
were raptured, surprisingly.
Anyone that dislikes Boyfriend Dungeon. But you mentioned like, you know, with podcasting or with like curating the stuff, like I've had the same thing with podcasting. Like, you know, I'm an indie dev, and when I bring other indie devs on, I get to learn from them like what they've done, like especially like when it comes to like publisher relationships, which can a lot of times feel like a black box, and you learn so much when you sit.
Well, that's on purpose. It's the power dynamic.
Right,
It's like they have all the information and all the money, and you don't have any of either of those things. And so you go into those conversations and you feel like, you know, Emperor's New Clothes. Like you don't know if your game is good or not, and you're basically waiting for them to give you a little award and say like, we approve of this, and we will give you some small amount of money in exchange for all of your blood and your firstborn child. And you will like it, right? And that's like, that is changing. Like, I think that what you see now, games like Journey could never have shipped, you know, 10 years before they did. And now, 10 years after Journey, look at all the kinds of content that can get out there. And the only way that that happens is if we promote ourselves and we reach those audiences, because the conservative approver, they're not going to be opening the gateway for you, right? They're going to save all those chips for the thing they know they can double down on that's going to make them, for every $1 they spend, $5. And that's one way to do business, but the more sustainable and holistic way to do it is to do it dollar for dollar, right?
I have a game pitch for you. It's a battle royale, and there are guns. I'm just saying, I think it's the new frontier.
Keep going.
When it starts raining from the sky.
There will be
pulls a string.
Yes. There will also be blood and guts.
What?
Yep.
Well,
I think it's perfect.
Yeah, I think it might have an audience.
Render this blood. We might be able to get you
there
a
will
deal
be
with
like
a graphics card
20 different
producer.
guns.
A person actually stands in your house and just like drips water on you while you're playing.
Are we
Truly immersive experience.
It is interesting seeing that kind of design in like these, you know, macro cycles of game design in AAA, and then in indie, completely ignoring that and be like, whatever, like whatever's big, or parodying it.
You know what I've been thinking about a lot lately is the Cheesecake Factory.
What, like the venue or just
like, have you been to the Cheesecake Factory?
Yes.
So what the Cheesecake Factory does is they look at top line restaurants that innovate in food. So for example, tuna tartare. not available at most restaurants and most people's local stores, but they go to a big city, they go to the Cheesecake Factory, and they get some tuna tartare, and they're like, that's fucking amazing, right? They take the best little appetizers and small innovations off of high-end restaurant lists. They push the price down, and then they put the whole fucking thing on one menu.
Interesting.
So the Cheesecake Factory is taking the best indie concepts in food and turning them into a mass-produced, publicly available extravaganza, and that is why they make bank. They make so much money because they are looking for innovations that they can compress down and put into a format that is literally any indie concept you could possibly imagine on one menu. And I keep thinking, who is the games publisher that's going to do this? Who is going to be the games equivalent of the Cheesecake Factory?
Me.
It's going to be. I think it might end up being something like a Stadia or a Google, like it might be something like that. Yeah. Like you might end up being able to go look through YouTube links at the best possible innovations and get those little things. It's because the publisher doesn't really care about a brand portfolio. They don't care about looking like a specific thing. I mean, Cheesecake Factory looks like something, but I don't know what it is.
Looks like
it's
everything.
It's like Egypt plus Italy or whatever.
It's like Las Vegas, basically.
They're giving the people what they want, and they don't care about whether they look cool doing it, and they're making a lot of money. And I think that if I was a publisher right now, that's where I would be pushing myself. I wouldn't be trying to be the cool publisher with a big brand that like everybody recognizes. I would put the games up front and step way the fuck back.
Yeah.
I mean, I think part of it, like to go back to the Cheesecake Factory thing, is like the accessibility of that also. Like you were saying, like for somebody like, my mom lives in the middle of nowhere. Like, there's no tuna tartare. Like she came out and like house out for me where I was gone, and I think she ate sushi for like literally every meal because like there's no sushi in the middle of Pennsylvania. Like nobody's eating sushi in the middle of Pennsylvania, and like that's not a thing that you would regularly like have accessibility to, or you might feel awkward doing it. You know, like when I first started off in games and doing biz dev and stuff, like I was incredibly awkward going to business dinners. I had no idea what any of the food was. I didn't know which silverware to use. I didn't understand wine or food or anything like that, and like it's really intimidating and it's very scary. And these are people that are like that I'm talking to that have more money than anybody in my family has ever seen. And I'm like trying to like convince them that they should also give me money or care about things that I'm doing while also like pretending that I understand what the hell I'm eating and like what this stupid fork does. We're like Cheesecake Factory. It's like you don't have to try. And like think about what the experience was like. Let's take a Wayback Machine to when you were still a child.
I could be 40.
And then the only place you could buy a game was to go into a GameStop, right? And a GameStop was just as intimidating and just as overwhelming for someone that didn't understand games culture. It was just as gatekeepy. And you would never see Boyfriend Dungeon there. You would never see Katamari there, right? You wouldn't see Journey there. Those kinds of games would never have made it onto a disc. Into a store. And like, I think Katamari sold 500,000 copies when it came out, and you had to special order it from the GameStop. Like you had to basically go and say, hey, I really want this game. I'm a weirdo that like reads Japanese games magazines. Can you please order this game? And that was like incredibly intimidating. But then if you're a girl on top of it, the way that this culture has changed is that media is no longer put into these boxes. It's a lot. I mean, it really is. The internet is effectively the Cheesecake Factory. Online stores are the Cheesecake Factory. At least they could be.
Yeah. If they were a little prettier.
If they were a little prettier.
If they had more 5-foot story Egyptian like god statues on them.
I think that we should just we should make a Cheesecake Factory skin for Steam.
Oh my god!
And just send it to them.
Yeah. Just be like, hey, I think I solved your problem for you. I thought of an Anubis statue.
Gosh. I thought you were gonna say we should have a Cheesecake Factory booth at like a PAX or something with like the really ugly Corinthian
I would love the idea of like some like high level person at the Cheesecake Factory being like, these video game people emailed me. They want you to come to E3.
That we haven't actually tapped into.
We were talking way more about Cheesecake Factory than I thought we would on this podcast.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you not read the show notes?
Brought to you by Cheesecake Factory.
Should have read about it.
Actually sponsored
I'm so sad. I'm so sad Canada doesn't have a Cheesecake Factory.
Red Lobster hasn't hit me up either, so I'm still waiting on them.
We saw like Arby's. Like Arby's is like papercraft and gaming. Like we're gonna
mix
that stuff together.
Yeah, every once in a while, like I had Geico reach out to me a few years ago, and they were like, we want to get into gaming, and I'm like, okay. Cool, like that's great, and they're like esports, and I was like, oh, that's a different thing.
I really want that to just have been the email. It's just like, hey, games,
esports. I've had so many conversations that are like that, where it's like people that it's just like I get introduced by a friend of a friend of a friend, and then they're like, hey, we want to find out about esports. Do indie games do esports? And I was just like, this is a really really long conversation that we need to be having right now. It's just like that is a whole different thing, and like I don't know anything about it.
I'm curious. Do you have that experience like running Kitfox and like talking with people? Are they like, so tell us about the MOBA that you're building? Like, do you get that now?
No.
Like, okay, that's good.
No, not yet.
You've been able to scare that away so far.
So far. But, I mean, I would be down for, like, esports dating. I have no idea what that would look like. But, you know.
It could be pretty good,
Yeah,
actually.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
That would be a really
I know now all the gears are turning in all of our heads.
I know, it's like,
esports dating.
how do we monetize
this?
Yeah.
I'm just imagining like a full like coliseum of people just watching this and being
Yes.
like, don't date him. Like, don't do it, girl. No, say no.
He's bad for you.
You made out with the other girl. Don't do it.
Real time.
Wait, isn't that just a dating show?
Dudes,
Yeah.
Like,
Oh my God, that would be
people and just
amazing.
like.
You could have live action like in the background, like people just kind of like standing back there in costume and stuff and kind of acting it out as it's going.
My gosh.
Like, have you
Let's make this happen.
Yes.
It's like when the question's like, have you put on deodorant at Gamescom? And it's like,
There's a cooking section.
I'm sorry.
You gotta go.
You're out.
Yeah. Robin.
Yes.
You mentioned teaching.
I do.
I'm curious about the balance between that and also running a studio.
Well, so I'm really lucky. Funomena is 30 people now, and I have a full-time GM named Jason Haber, who I love, who does a fantastic job of running the studio. And I have an amazing co-founder, Martin Milton, who I also love, who does an amazing job of making sure that the technical portfolio is always set. Like, he's basically the tech director, and he also does the finances. So my job is to run business development, make sure projects are on the rails, and then I have a whole team of producers. So day-to-day Funomena runs pretty much without my intervention, and my goal is to make myself pretty obsolete. Like, a good CEO is not in the way of projects. I'm solving problems when they occur, which are usually financial or publisher related.
Right.
And then I'm mostly taking my time to think about where the business should go. And so I need a lot of me time. I need a lot of quiet time.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about teaching at Santa Cruz is that Santa Cruz is about an hour and 20 minutes from where I live in San Francisco. So I get into my car and I put on some Boards of Canada or some
Spawn on Me, very
some
great
Tribe Called Quest, and I drive down the one really slow, and I just think. And so my commute down to school in the morning is really helpful for me because I can think about all the stuff I'm trying to accomplish and kind of run scenarios and think strategically about what we're doing. I'm always trying to think about 5 years from now, Funomena, 10 years from now, 100 years from now.
Yeah.
Like I try to think on those timelines because I want the people that work for me to be happy, and I want their families to be happy, and I want us to be able to make games together until we can't. So the job actually affords me this space. And then when I get to school, I'm usually teaching or meeting with students and reviewing their games. I teach the senior sequence in my program.
Okay.
And so I stay with the same kids all 3 quarters, and I get to see their game go from an idea all the way to completion.
That's fantastic.
And so it's kind of like I get to produce games at school, and I produce games at Funomena. And that is really awesome because the skill set that I'm using is what I'm good at, and I get to use it across all the contexts in my life. And I've really tried very hard to build an integrated life. Like, it's not that much of a secret, but I was a PhD candidate in robotics and AI. And I was working on robots that could search and rescue, which is like kind of the same as search and destroy, just one instruction. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm going to end up working for Rand Corporation or DARPA building robots that kill people. I don't want to do that. I'll just make video games. But I really thought about it for a long time and was like, well, how can I make a lifestyle where I'm doing creative work on the projects I want to work on, that I'm not killing people, and I'm actually, at best, I'm a zero, you know, like I'm a zero force. But I definitely am not a negative force in this world. And so I make a lot of decisions about my life, that I curate my projects, the people in my life, and the things that I spend my time on, so that they're always trying to go in one direction, which is increasing the peace and making the planet more sustainable and more survivable and more fun. So teaching is really, I don't know, I guess you'd say it kind of fills my tank. Like fills my battery a little bit, like whenever I'm around there. I will say that, you know, there's no job that doesn't have stress. And definitely teaching at a public university in these times, there are sometimes financial stresses and services aren't always the best. But I think Santa Cruz in particular does a really good job of the people that are motivated to serve the students are super motivated. And so I have staff there as well. Bennett Williamson and Juan Roca are both my favorites. They have worked really hard to make the program successful. And in fact, we're the fastest growing undergraduate major on campus.
Nice.
And the second largest major in the Division of the Arts. And we only have 4 faculty. So we're half the size of the next smallest program, and we serve the second largest population. So we're really doing a lot with very little right now. If you want to donate to UC Santa Cruz, call me. It's a good cause.
It's really wild to me, like always thinking about like the size of organizations and like, you know, because when you're a single indie, you think like, oh, like these like really big studios, big indies, like they must be huge. But then you'd say Funomena's 30 people.
Yeah, 30 people.
Your department's 4 people. And then like how big is Kitfox, Victoria?
8 people.
Yeah.
And you guys are making like a ridiculous amount of
We have a lot of things going on, It's like, oh God.
So many plates spinning. What do you, so you have Boyfriend Dungeon.
Yeah, so we're developing Boyfriend Dungeon.
Right.
We just announced yesterday we're creating Lucifer Within Us. So we're developing 2 games. We're publishing Dwarf Fortress, and we're publishing 6 Ages. And we might have another thing in the works.
Oh my
Don't
gosh.
ask.
Can't say.
There's a lot of things going on.
Do you just want like a project per person at the studio?
Right? It's fine. It's totally
What's
fine.
your game gonna be?
It's going to be about Cheesecake Factory.
Okay.
And dating.
And dating and tuna tartare and peas.
In the apocalypse.
And the apocalypse.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you just put manager at the end of it, and then it's a game.
Oh my God, I would totally play that.
That's what I'm saying, right?
It's making
That's
me
what I'm
hungry.
saying. Totally.
I need a third lunch.
5th lunch simulator.
Yeah.
Kelly, so how big do you want the Indie Mega Booth to get at this point?
Oh, that's
like
a good question.
The booth size or the company size, or
well,
both?
I mean, I would think that they would both kind of go together in that way to a certain
Locked in,
extent.
right?
Well, I don't know. I mean, so this is a kind of funny thing with events. At some point, it's like the hardest part is like all the stuff at the beginning.
Yeah.
And like the size and the scale, it matters, but like it kind of doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know, like, we've looked at scoping out doing like rebooting the mega show events and things like that. And I'm like, okay, we need to get the budget down. What if we like cut the attendance in half? We cut the developers in half. It's like, oh, we saved $5,000.
Like physically,
Right.
Yeah,
Cut
it's
them in
like,
half.
yeah,
Right,
it's
right.
all, it's all the venue. It's like the work that goes into getting it going. It's the marketing around it. Like if you're marketing to 100 people versus like 1,000 people, it's like not actually that much different. Like kind of when you get into that realm of it. So, I mean, at some point, like, and I've been talking with a few people about this over the last like year or two. I'm like, okay, how many people do we actually need to do the volume of work that we're doing? Because for the first few years, it was a lot of just like me and 2 or 3 other people just like working our asses off constantly and underpaying ourselves and just going. So for like a while, we were like 3, maybe 4 people. Yeah. And that was like when the mega booth was like really growing and a lot of stuff was happening. And that was totally unsustainable. And then everything in my life like totally imploded all at the same time. And I was like, okay, I can't actually keep doing this. So like, how many people do we need? And like, can we be sustainable at that? And so like, the thing I've discovered is like, okay, we're like maybe 6, 7 people now. I think at some point, maybe like 10, 12 people might be kind of like, if we were to expand in some things that I want to, like that would kind of be our size. But like, are we sustainable at the size of the people that we need to do the work that I want to do? And the answer is no, we're not. So that is like currently the problem that I'm solving now. Like, and one of the reasons that I'm having a lot of meetings while I'm here, but like, it's actually really good to know that that's like kind of what the issue is. And also that there is a lot of demand for like a lot of, there's a lot of fragmentation right now, and obviously in platforms, there's a lot of stuff going on in the indie scene right now. There is tons of stuff, and to me, that means there's a lot of opportunity, and there's a lot of ways to like do something that is cohesively solving problems for like everything that is kind of like basically blown apart. And so I find that really exciting, but it's also frustrating to me to be like, well, if I just had a little bit more resources or a little bit more people or a little bit more time, we could generate a really high, like incredible amount of like success for a lot of people, or to do a lot of things with just like what is relatively considered a small amount of money. So that's kind of like where we're at. And so I don't want us to be this thing where we're like 100 or 200 or 300 people, because I don't think we really need to be. But also in some ways we kind of are. Like when we do a show, we like sort of expand from being like 5 or 6 people to being 250 people because we're like managing all the developers and we're working with all the teams. There's multiple people and there's all the vendors. So it's like in some ways like organizationally like we sort of are, but it's like we're a company of like 300 entrepreneurs. It's just like a nightmare scenario, essentially.
Everyone is like, how can I get the best ROI off this thing at this moment, at this time?
I thought about this a lot
like,
just in terms of building a company. Like, Funomena is 30 people, but we have 4 teams, And so it's like you've got about 7, average of about 7 people working together on a single project.
Yeah.
And then you've got a little overhead. You've got a GM and a person that's basically working to keep the office running. And when you end up looking at that scale, it's really important to think about, the 7 to 8 person experience, which is kind of what you both have right now. Mm-hmm. How do you make that sustainable? And then how do you duplicate that sustainability? And for us, Funomena is a deliberately developmental organization, which means like if you're having a bad day, you don't put the mask on and then go to work and are like, everything's fine, and then like sob like behind your mask at your desk or in your car at lunch. You just call in or write an email and say, hey man, like, you know, my wife and I had some problems this weekend and I didn't get a lot of sleep and I'm not going to be at work this week. I need to take some time off. Like, and these are the tasks I can't get done, but these are the things I'll do from home, blah, 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 blah. And then we need to fill in for each other. So there needs to be a little bit of slack. And I think what I've learned over time running the company, and actually before running Funomena, running the team at that game company and being the executive producer there, and then running teams at EA before that, is that you have to have a little bit of slack all the time. And you need to plan for about half the work that you think you can do.
Interesting.
You just plan, like at Funomena, we plan for people to get 2 to 4 solid hours of work done a day.
Yeah.
Because you come in, you have meetings, you do your email, then pretty soon it's lunchtime, and then you have your afternoon. And maybe in your afternoon you don't hit a bug or you don't hit a problem and you can just jam all the way through.
Yeah.
But sometimes you hit something that is like not even on your plate, and then you have to go over to their desk and talk to them about it. And so if you budget for like half the work of a full day, so 4 hours, it's 4 hours a day on average, then you're probably still going to have to do a little bit of replanning towards the end of a project, but you're not putting yourself in the toxic bucket, which is like really, really the most common fail for any developer, but especially indies, is taking on way too much and underestimating the way that other people's needs will impact your needs. Like you're an indie and you're like, well, we'll just make our game. And you don't think about all the publishing assets you need to get to your publisher, or the ways in which the store is going to require you to do updates and blah, 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 blah. You kind of have this bubble around you and you're like, it's just me and I'll just do the work. And it turns out actually you exist in a world of people, and all those people impact your ability to get shit done.
And you're thinking about it in real proactive ways of budgeting for humanness, right?
Yes.
It's like making sure that you can...
Yeah, it's a lot of like theoretical planning. It's like, in theory, it should take me this long. In theory, it should be this. In theory, it takes this many people. And like one of my favorite quotes, even though I don't always go along with it, is like, in theory and practice, there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice there is.
Yes.
And like, there's always like things that are happening beyond your control and that you don't understand. And this is a lot of the shift that like I made in the Mega Booth over the last like year or two, is that like is building in for like, well, in theory we could just all do this and we could work for this amount of money, and then like, you know, this and this, and then it's like, oh well, yeah, now I got sick and now the whole thing is fucking blown up and we're 4 months off schedule because I got a cold, which is like it's zero room for failure or zero room for like anything to come in there, and like nobody can exist at zero failure.
And that applies to game design too, because like you just got to keep cutting scope, because you always overscope.
You should come teach my class.
I'm
always telling them.
The whole thing is just a recording of like cut.
Do less. And my classes, when we start, I ask the students, how are you doing? And then we all raise our hands and we say, we're doing the best that we can. And that's all anyone can ever do.
I rep for that hard.
You know, it's all anyone can ever do. And that, like, this is the life lesson that I try to teach, is that, yeah, you know, you made a great game. It's awesome. Suddenly you have these opportunities to publish other games and to do all this stuff. Whoa, now you have 5 times the workload. Congratulations. How are you doing? Well, I'm doing the best that I can. And sometimes you wake up in the middle of the night and your heart is racing and you're sweating and you're like, we're never going to be able to do it. We'll run out of money before it's too late. Oh my God, what? And then you realize that everybody has these moments. It's like, you could be running a games business, you could be running a hot dog stand, you could be running a podcast, you could be running E3. And suddenly, like, oh my God, half the people that we thought were going to show up aren't going to be exhibiting this year. So got to make it work, right?
Yep.
Everybody has their ups and downs, no matter where they are in the chain. So it's very important to remember that. And like, if you can get that into your culture early, like, do you feel like you got that at Kitfox now? Like, do you have this? Do you have a sense of self-compassion and self-care at the
I mean, so our captain, Tanya, she's been a huge like proponent of like no crunch, like definitely being all about like the self-care and making sure everything is fine, and putting like, you know, the humans first instead of the projects, because in the end we are just making games. You like take care of yourself. But I think that's a problem like the creative industry, especially games, has, is that because we love games and, you know, it's our passion and we've always wanted to make games, that we're willing to sink like just hours and hours and never stop, and we're like, it's not work because it's fun. And then
until it is work.
Until it is work. And then you burn out. And then you quit games forever because you're so like jaded by the whole process. So it's really important to take time for yourself and to remember you're a human that needs a break.
It really does happen too. I just had lunch with someone that I worked with a long time ago, and they were saying, you know, like, I have to really still do the work of remembering that, like, I'm not the product, and you know, that like when you recover from a long crunch, I mean, like, I've had so many conversations with people about this. It's just, it takes a long time. I don't think people realize how how much damage you do with every day you're burning it at both ends. Like when your battery gets low, it's like, think about it like your computer battery. When your computer battery gets low and you run it down to the bottom over and over and over again, you reduce the battery's capacity to ever recharge. Yeah. Like if you keep it at 30%, it eventually kind of gets lock-in at around 30 to 45%, and it never goes above that, which is why they say run the battery down, charge it all the way up. Right. Run the battery down, charge it all the way up. But we don't do that with ourselves. And then suddenly we're like, it's holidays, right? We got to take a break from work. We go home for vacation and immediately get a cold. Yeah. Immediately get the flu. We're sick the whole vacation. We go back to work. Our battery is even lower than when we left. And like, that's your body telling you that you didn't take enough time off. And like, I have seen this with my students. I see it with people that are above me and publishers and all over the place. It's a constant struggle. You need to remember that you got to charge the battery all the way up before you start again.
Yeah, I think the problem is that it creeps up on you too. Like you don't expect it, and then suddenly you're like, why am I so tired and unmotivated all the time?
Why am I so cranky?
And then you're like on the floor crying. You're like, oh, I think I'm burnt out. But it's like it's one of those things where you don't realize it, and then it happens, and you need to take that break.
Yeah, I had this day like a few weeks ago where I was just super fucking mad. Like I was just really angry, and like I don't know what. I just took a nap and I woke up and I felt way better. I was so tired. I was mad. Like that's how tired I was. And I barely even noticed it, And I was like, oh, I instantly feel a lot better than I did like 2 hours ago.
Your body knows. Your body is always talking to you in that way.
Yeah. And I think, especially for tech and game stuff, a lot of it is very heady. It's very intellectual. You're in a computer, it's very digital. And so like there is like this very big and strong disconnect between like what your body is telling you and what you're kind of like visually taking in and what's digitally coming in. And then also too, I think there's a component around kind of like the community and the consumer education around like these issues and how does burnout work and how are games actually made. Like this idea where it's just like we need $40,000 and the game's going to be ready tomorrow, and it's like that's not true at all. Like that game did not take 24 hours and $40,000 to make. Like that game probably took years, and it took all these things and all this experience and all these people's time. And I think that's changing in some way, but that's still there. And there's also a little bit too, I think, from like a kind of outside perspective where it's like, this is fun. You're making games. It's cool. Like, shut up. Make the game. And like in a lot of ways, like this is a really amazing industry, and there's a lot of like creative output and opportunity, and you get to do all of these really cool things. But it's the same way in anything. Like I would imagine, like with music or like movies or anything. Like it's great, but there's still a lot of difficulty. There's a lot of stuff behind the scenes, and it's not an easy thing to get to the point where you're like you are the person on a stage at E3, like announcing or launching a game. Like very few people get to do stuff like that. Very few people are Madonna. She only has one name. That's why. Like,
it is really important to remember, right? That not every podcast that gets made gets viewed. Not every game that gets made gets sold, and not every project that you start gets finished. And it's like just the numbers game. People ask me that all the time. They say like, so after you made Journey, like what were you afraid of? And I was like, I was afraid that I would take myself too seriously and expect anything I ever made ever again to be nearly as successful, because it was a perfect storm of having publisher support, being an indie title that resonated with people emotionally on a platform that was highly available for a cheap price because we were super indie. And we had, we didn't have that much money to charge, and it came out right after Flow and Flower, and like all these things worked really well for us. And the last thing you want to do is believe that you can do it again. Like I have a friend that says this. The worst thing you can say to somebody is maybe working on your second game. After a big success. The second game is always so hard, right? Someone that really blows up, suddenly they think like I have to beat this, and you just can't. Like the numbers are there to remind you that you are just a statistic, and you are usually an outlier if anybody pays attention to you in anything.
Well, that's an important point you brought up before. It's like, we were talking about like, preparing for when we're stressed, or preparing for the downtime, the hard times. But it's like, it's just as important to prepare for the good times, right? Like, all right, I'm just expecting my game to fail, or I'm expecting it not to sell well. And all right, mentally prepare myself. Oh, it did really well.
Oh, shit.
All right, what do I didn't prepare for this.
What did you call that? Like a success failure?
It's a success disaster.
A success disaster.
Yes. People that have the success disaster where they do something because they're really passionate about it and they're not prepared for it to be successful. And then it is, and then they have no plans in place for how to deal with what comes after. Like I have a couple friends actually that have become millionaires from making games and then spent a year or two just curled up in a ball. Like, I don't know what to do with myself now. I'm like, my whole identity was the struggle. My whole identity was hours of work. My whole identity was nobody likes me. And now all of a sudden people want to hang out with me, and I got all this money, and like, is this real? Like, you feel like you're in a dream, and then you feel exceptionally alone, right? And so that's the other thing, is that this kind of community, and what I love about it is that we can all support each other. Like Kelly and I have known each other for what, like 6 years now?
Yeah.
And like we all can support one another in various ways. Like, I mean, how many times have we chatted late at night?
My God.
How many times? How many
My
times?
God. I mean, that's the beauty of it, is like just being able to say, like, I see you.
Yeah.
I understand that the humanness of all this.
Yeah.
This is all dust in the wind, right?
Yeah. And you're doing the work. And like, I see you out there shining, and like, congratulations. Or I saw that tweet. Are you doing okay? Like, Kyle always checks in on me when I subtweet. Always.
He's a
super subtweet friend.
I mean, it's love, right?
It's true.
That's the thing, is like, this is all, again, like dust in the wind. We never know what the next thing is going to be.
Right.
We're all trying to figure it all at the same time. And we're all living through it together in some form of fashion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Looks like our time is almost up. It was actually
so
is
great
up.
to be here with you.
It is already flown by. It's unreasonable how quick this was. And thank you all so much.
Thank you so much.
For
We'd be
coming
a great
through and hanging out.
apocalypse team.
Yes.
We would be fine.
Yeah.
We'd hole up in the Cheesecake Factory. And
Tuna tartare and peas for
Meet
everyone.
you at the Cheesecake Factory. 10 minutes.
Before we go, I want you all to pitch your stuff. Victoria,
Okay.
you go on ahead first.
Cool. I'm Victoria at the Tran on Twitter, but you can find all our stuff on Kitfox at Kitfox Games, everywhere, Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff. But yeah, we're making Boyfriend Dungeon, which is a dating simulator dungeon crawler mashup where you date your weapons and they turn into beautiful people. We also just announced Lucifer Within Us, which is basically you play as a digital exorcist and you kind of purge demons and solve mysteries. That's
cool. It's super cool.
Thank you.
Robin, what you got?
I say I'm Robin Hunicke, the CEO and designer at Funomena, and also the teacher at UC Santa Cruz in art, games, and playable media. And my students are showing games at Indiecade, so come see them here at E3. We'll be releasing Luna for the PlayStation and PSVR on June 18th. Wow. And Watam will be coming out this fall, I hope.
Oh, snap.
So snaps. That's also going to be coming out on the PlayStation and other platforms to be announced. And you can find us online at Funomena.com. Funomena. Phenomena.
Kelly, what you got for me?
I'm Kelly Wallick. I'm Kelly Wallick on most social media stuff, but very quiet there. So you should also follow Indie Mega Booth. We're at Indie Mega Booth on all of the social media stuff. We have PAX West coming up as our next big showcase, so keep an eye out for announcements around that. We didn't really talk about it too much, but I'm also the chairperson for the IGF, and I've been working on a fund, which is not totally announced yet, but some interesting, exciting stuff that's going on around that. And so just follow us, and if you have any questions about the Indie Mega Booth, you can reach us at contact@indiemegabooth.com.
Cool. Dylan, take us out.
All right, we're headed out. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to get our next group of guests.
Yes. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.